Someone You Should Know. A program about people you know and even more that you don't. Hosted by Stuart Sachs, veteran, husband, father, and grandfather. Now, here's your host, Stuart Sachs.
Well, good day to everyone, and welcome to another edition of Someone You Should Know. Lots going on in the news, needless to say. We will, are following it very, very closely, and a lot of it revolves around elections. And right now, there seems to be more confusion about the elections and election process than most of us lay people can even wrap our arms around. So I've invited a good friend who is also an election official, Debbie Klein. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have somebody that has far more answers than I have, and just in talking with other people socially, the question of the mail-in ballots is probably number one. That's probably the highest thing. I want to try and wrap our arms a little bit around what everybody, and because this show is broadcast nationwide, there are some rules that apply to everybody in the country. Then there's a lot of rules that apply to individual states. And I don't know whether there's different rules that apply within counties of the states. But you're here to try and help set some of those rules straight. Number one is, if people are not registered to vote yet, the curtain is coming down very quickly.
That's true. Next Monday, October the 5th, is the last day to register, at least in Texas. I'm not 100% sure whether that's nationwide or not.
So now when you say...
Probably close to that.
When you say Monday, does that mean that people can register online today and on Saturday and on Sunday? They have that opportunity, or do they is it either today or Monday because they're closed on Saturday and Sunday?
Well, unfortunately, in Texas, you cannot register online. You can go online and get the form and print it out. I think it has to be postmarked by Monday.
Okay. So for those that have not registered to vote, at least in Texas, number one, go online. Everybody knows how to Google. Go online and Google probably the best bet is to Google your individual county, even within your state, and find out if it means downloading the registration form, filling it out, and either scanning it to send back or mailing it back. As Debbie says, as long as it's postmarked by the deadline date, you're okay. So now everybody has now registered to vote, and then you're faced with the dilemma. Okay, let's see the choices I have. I'm going to be out of the country on election day, so I need an absentee ballot, and let me back up a second. Is an absentee ballot and a mail-in ballot the same thing?
Yes, those are exactly the same thing.
Okay, so if I'm going to be out of the country, I need to get an absentee ballot soon so I can fill it out and get it in the mail to mail back in. Okay, and if you get a mail-in ballot and you decide that you don't want to, because of all of the controversy about the mail, you don't want to put it in a mailbox because it may get slowed up and may not get there in time. What are your options if you don't want to put it in a mailbox?
There's really two options. One is to take it to your county election office. In Collin County, that's in McKinney. In Denton County, it's in Denton. You could take it personally and hand it to them, but you have to go into the building. You have to show an ID, a photo ID, and you have to sign a form. The second option is to just go and vote in person. Take the ballot not filled out, or if even not filled out is best, just in the sealed envelope it came in. Take it with you, vote in person. You surrender that ballot to the election official, and they cancel it, and then you could vote in person. If you don't have the ballot with you when you go and vote in person, you have to vote provisionally. But as long as they don't receive that mail-in ballot back, then your vote's going to count.
Okay, all right. So I want to really kind of go over that again.
Okay.
I've got a mail-in ballot. Let's say I fill it out completely, and I put it in the envelope. And then I decide, you know what? I think I'm going to either take it and drop it off, or you know what? I think I'm going to go to early voting and do it in person. If I have filled out the ballot and I put it in the envelope and I seal the envelope and sign it like I'm going to the post office, I can just take that to the polling place and hand it to them and say, I decided to vote in person.
I believe that's correct. We
And
can
then
cancel the mail-in ballot, and you can vote in person.
okay.
If you don't take it, what's going to happen is when they sign you in to vote, it's going to show in the computer that you have a mail-in ballot.
Okay. All right.
Until that's canceled, you can't vote.
All right. So you're saying that if I decide I go to early voting and I vote in person, I cast my ballot, that is put in, but it is not counted until they make sure that they do not receive the mail-in
Correct.
that I received earlier.
Correct.
Okay, it's a little confusing. So really,
it's confusing, but that's the only way they'll know that somebody is not voting twice.
okay. So then the best advice, and again, for folks that are listening that are in Seattle or in Colorado or Maine or Florida, whatever, check with your local officials to make sure that whatever the process is there. It seems to me that probably the best thing is don't fill out your mail-in ballot unless you in fact decide that's what you're going to do. Because if you go in and surrender an unfilled out ballot that's not in the sealed envelope and all, will they just shred it right there or something and
send it back to the election office? It goes back and then they do that.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, that's a good double check, but I kept thinking, I was just kind of playing devil's advocate there and trying to figure out, okay, so I'm going to vote in person, but my vote really doesn't count that day when it goes into the ballot box because they've got to make sure that the old one is disqualified.
Yeah, that's only if you did not bring it with you to surrender it. If you bring it with you and surrender it, then we take out that warning that you mail-in ballot. That's gone.
So you're saying the information that's in the computer then will show that you received the absentee ballot, but you surrendered it on that date and voted in person, and also now you're good to go.
That's correct, and your vote counts that day.
It's a tough problem.
It is a really tough thing, and I just want to say one thing about voting in person.
Please.
I got an okay from my doctor to work the election. I mean, I was honestly concerned because of the number of people that are going to come through. And I'm over 65. I have some health issues that would make me vulnerable. And so I was a little nervous about it. But she felt like, because she voted in early voting, so she saw all the precautions that were taken are being taken to keep everybody safe, voters and workers. And she gave me the okay to go ahead and vote. So I do not think that anybody has any reason to fear voting in person.
Now, the precautions that you mentioned, I remember when I went for primary voting, even they and runoff voting,
Right.
they had tape on the floor, 6 feet apart, so people would approach the desk, easily one at a time.
Right.
Is this also a county or statewide process that varies by state as to the extent of caution that they're going to be taken?
I think possibly, but I know the 6-foot distance markers are probably nationwide. I mean, here we had the plexiglass between the clerk and the voter. We
Right.
have, the clean pens and the used pens. So we clean the pens all the time because so many people are using them. The distance markers, if somebody comes in without a mask, we have a mask for them. We can't require that people wear masks in the polling location.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I'm surprised that they did that. I mean,
Yeah.
I can understand that you say you must wear the mask once you get in to work on the ballot if you want to take it off, or something that can't be restrictive. But I would think that they would make it mandatory for everybody walking in and walking out to be wearing a mask. But again, that'll fluctuate from city to city and
Right.
county and state.
Right. So
Well, see that right there, that's a reason, that's almost a reason why some people would say, well, listen, if I'm going to go to a polling place and I'm an at-risk voter,
mhm,
I got two choices. I either try to go early voting at an off-peak time,
yes.
or I'm just going to fill out that puppy and put it in the mail and send it in or drop it off.
That's true for in Texas, you have to be 65 or older, have a disability, pretty much are going to be out of your county during early voting and election day. I mean, there's 3 weeks of early voting minus one day, which is Columbus Day, and election day. I mean, it's probably rare that somebody's going to be gone that long, but it's possible. Um, they tried to get the COVID reason or fear of COVID to be one of the reasons you could vote by mail, and that was shot down by the court. So that is really not a reason to vote absentee or vote by mail.
I have to believe that for election officials like yourself, it's almost like being an accountant. Every year before you file your taxes, there are so many new rules and regulations that are changed that you have to go through classes each election in order to go through all those updates.
Yes, we do.
And what is that process like? If somebody, is it too late for anybody to sign up to be an election official?
No, it's not too late. And
Oh, it
they
isn't? Okay.
still need election officials. And I'm guessing that is true for every state.
All right. And what is the process if somebody says, you know what? All right, I'd like to be an election official. What do they do?
You can either call the Democratic or Republican Party, or you can call your county election office.
Okay. And I think we have
at each polling location, you have to have a mixture, an even number of Democratic election officials and Republican election officials, a Democratic judge or alternate judge, and a Republican judge or alternate judge.
And how long is the process to if you say, okay, I'd like to do it, what is the hour of education process in order to be certified to do it?
It's a day's worth of education. If you've never done it before, it's pretty much a full day. I mean, they did a little bit of changing to the computer system so that the clerks have more of an ability to do some things that before you had to call, like cancel a mail-in ballot. We can do that locally right then instead of having to call the election office to get that done. It's a much faster process. So our training went a little longer. So they pretty much used probably 3.5 hours for just the computer part. And then there's a law class where you go over all the rules and everything. And that was probably another 2.5 to 3 hours.
So it's a lengthy process, but it's a process that's necessary to make sure that everything is right. Now you've been doing this for many years.
It's been about, I think this is my 7th year.
Okay, and now then for each election that comes up, do you have to physically go for training, or is that something that you can do updated through the computer?
We physically go to training.
So now that's been a little challenging because now you have to go someplace where there's other people and be covered and social distanced.
They actually had the room set up really well where everybody was at least 6 feet apart. And of course the computers were cleaned before we used them in the computer class. In the other class, it was just chairs, and they were spaced at least 6 feet apart, maybe even more. And we did have to wear masks there.
Now we do a fairly significant part of our listenership is in Collin County, and you are in Collin County and an election official there. We do have a phone number if somebody wants to call the Collin County election office in order to get additional information, and we'll post that up on the screen momentarily. Beyond that, those that live in Denton County, Tarrant County, other counties around Texas, just Google your county election office, and they'll have information there. And this goes for statewide and nationwide, wherever you are. If you're unsure, first place to go is to your county election office. It will generally show you where the polling places are, what the early days of voting are, what the hours are, and you can get a lot of questions answered, because if you want to call to try and get your questions answered, you're either going to be sitting on hold for a long time or told to leave a message and somebody maybe get back to you. You can find the information. It's there online wherever you're living, and it's a good idea. Early elections. We said here in Texas is 13 days, 15 days?
Actually 18 days. It's the
18 days of early election, and the polling places are open during the week from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. Now, if you're an election official, do you have to be there 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. each day, or is it shifts?
It depends on the location. Most locations have people come in shifts. I'm an alternate judge, and I'm scheduled to work the entire day every day.
Wow, that's long days. And you said that they're in a general election like this, there's supposed to be an equal number of Republican and Democratic representatives on site.
Yes.
What happens if you've got the number of Republicans that you need and you're short on Democrats? How do they fill those slots?
Through the Democratic Party.
Okay.
At Collin County Democratic Party, or through the election office. The election office actually has a pretty long list of people who have called and said they were interested in being workers, clerks. And we need people, even if you're not computer savvy, we need people that can stand and kind of make sure everybody's standing 6 feet apart in the line. If there's a line, we need people that can just walk around the room where people are voting and make sure nobody has a question, make sure people don't walk out with their ballot, their paper ballot, that they put it in the ballot counter, because otherwise they voted and nothing happens with it. It doesn't get counted if it doesn't get into the counter. So we need people to do those kinds of things. We need people that will go around and clean the voting machines, clean the pens. So there's things people can do that don't really necessitate the amount of training that we have gone through.
Well, it sounds like there's an awful lot of responsibilities normally, and now because of the COVID, there are additional responsibilities that you have to not only do but supervise to make sure they're being done. Another question that I had, that someone asked me to ask, was, do all polling places have to be ADA compliant?
They're supposed to be, yes. I remember there was an issue with that a couple years ago, but yes, they are supposed to be ADA compliant. And we do have, voting machines are set up such that you can take them off of their stand. You can put that on a table, so if somebody's in a wheelchair, they can just wheel up to a table and vote that way. They all have the communication issues, so that if you're blind, you can do it, audibly. There's machines specifically if you're disabled and can't come in, but you wanted to vote in person, we take it out to the car. There's curbside voting, which is another option for people who, for one reason or another, if they really are in a vulnerable category and afraid of the COVID, they can go and vote curbside. We'll bring out the machine to the car.
I didn't know that.
Yes. And there's designated parking spaces for curbside voting that have the phone number to call, which is in Collin County, it's the Collin County election office. It's probably each county's election office. They will then call the judge and say, you have a curbside voter, and we will take the machine out and they can vote in the car.
It is an amazing process. And another thought that I had was, isn't it the responsibility of voters also to keep their eyes and ears open for any irregularities? You obviously have people that are in the voting areas and all, but for instance, if there's somebody outside at the entrance to the polling place that's soliciting people for votes, are there regulations that they have to be a certain distance away? Are there people that are watching so that is not an abused privilege?
They have to be, in Texas, they have to be 100 feet away, and there are markers at that 100-foot line, and they are not allowed, and they all know that, and most of them do not cross that line. So yes, we don't have somebody standing out there making sure, but if we get a complaint from a voter that comes in, then we will definitely go out and take care of it. The problem is outside of that 100-foot line where they are allowed, they can have a bullhorn. People feel accosted a lot of times, and we have a lot of complaints about that, but we can't do anything about it. Unfortunately, they can just, call the campaign of the person who's, doing that.
And they do. And I've seen that, because you're absolutely right. Beyond that 100-foot marker, you've just got rows and rows and rows of placards with the candidates' names. And if the candidate's there with with their family, they're all dressed up in a costume, they're waving and all, and they're trying to shake hands with people. But once the people pass that 100-foot marker, it's hands off, and then they go inside. But that's one of the reasons why I say that, because again, go online and look at all of the rules and regulations. There's lots of frequently asked questions that are on those sites. And if you see something, say you see someone that's in a wheelchair and they're having difficulty getting up that ramp or getting into the door, either assist them or ask somebody that's there to please assist this person to help them with the voting process. So we have to be prudent too, to know what our responsibilities are and what our limitations are as voters, but to keep our eyes and ears open to make sure that there isn't something that's irregular. Look, even as simple as you see people that don't have masks. So you may want to tell them, I just came out. If you don't have a mask, they'll give you one at the front table. Ask for one. Keep an eye to make sure that the hand sanitizer is filled, that it's not empty. These
Lots of hand sanitizer too.
Yeah, I was just at the grocery store yesterday, and we going back a month or so ago, you couldn't find any.
I know.
And the toilet paper was well stocked. Now I have never seen so many brands of hand sanitizer. And it's, instead of it just being a quarter of an aisle, it's like an aisle and a half of sanitizer, and they're in jugs, that will last you for the rest of your life. But we laugh at it, but these are the precautions that we have to take. Another area we just touched upon at the beginning, and that was when someone approaches the table, and first you are required to show ID.
Yeah.
And driver's license is usually the key form of identification. If someone comes in and they've just got their voter registration card, is that valid, or you have to have a photo ID?
You have to have a photo ID. There's 7 different types of photo IDs that are fine. Driver's license, passport or passport card, license to carry, either, a concealed weapon or a handgun. A military ID card is fine. Let me see if you don't have a driver's license, some people just have a ID card that's given by the Department of Public Safety. If they don't drive, but it's an ID card. So that's fine. Those kinds of things are fine. Now, there are people that have an exemption to having to have a photo ID, judges, some law enforcement people, a lot of federal employees, FBI, for example, and they'll have an exemption note on their voter registration card. So we know not to ask for the photo ID, but that's very rare. I mean, usually people have to have a photo ID. If you don't have a photo ID, there are ways that you can still vote and your vote will count. If you bring just your voter registration card or a birth certificate, a recent utility bill, or your paycheck, and then you have to just fill out a form that states why you don't have your photo ID. And we can't question and say, "Are you sure?" We don't do any of that. We just, some people have just, in Texas, it has to be like a Texas driver's license. It can't be a driver's license from another state, which is a problem, especially with students who have come here and registered to vote here, but they don't change their driver's license because they're in school. So they would say, I'm a student, I have an out-of-state driver's license on the form. and that's fine. Then they can vote, no problem. Because
Well, that brings up another question then. If they are a student that lives in Missouri, but they're going to college here, then are they supposed to get an absentee ballot to vote in Missouri? Or is it okay for them to walk into a Texas polling place and show them a Missouri ID and say, but I'm a full-time student at U of T in Austin or something?
it depends on where they're registered to vote.
Oh, okay.
If they did not register in Texas and they're still registered in Missouri, they would need to vote absentee for Missouri. If they registered, which a lot of college kids do because they have huge voter registration drives on college campuses.
Right.
So they register to vote here. Then they would they'd have to fill out that form.
And am I correct that you have to have at least one a voter registration, one form of photo ID to register? You don't have to have more than one.
That's correct.
Okay. And again, we're saying what is correct for Texas.
Yeah.
We don't know what it is in Mississippi or North Dakota or whatever. Check with your local county official office and all to find out, because if it says you have to bring two forms of ID, fine. But I guess I can't stress enough to those that are watching outside of the North Texas area where we're broadcasting from, that you have to check and see what your local, because you can't walk in there and say, oh, wait a minute, you say I have to give you two forms of ID, but I was listening to a radio show and they said you have to have one. It depends on your local situation. Now, in your experience, the early voting and Lauren and I have taken advantage of early voting quite a bit, and especially this year because we know if you don't think that on November 4th,
Sure.
isn't it?
Sure.
If you don't think that there's going to be lines at the polling places from opening until closing, you've been living under a rock. It is going to be a tremendously busy day. So it behooves you to vote early. And with the polling places open 7 days a week for that 15-day period, in your experience, are there certain days of the weeks or times of the day that are better for access to early vote?
Don't go the first day of early voting or the last 2 days of early voting. There's plenty of days in between that. Probably the weekends are a little bit busier, but not necessarily. I mean, I happen to work in a church. On Sunday, we're open from 1 to 6. So that's a little bit probably later than people would stay in the church. But we expected Sundays to be really busy in a church because people would go to church and then come vote. Well, they
Right.
were not busy at all. Now, some churches are probably still not having services in person. So that cuts down on that anyway. But Wednesdays are usually not busy. Wednesdays and Thursdays are the best day to go. If you go another day, I would say middle morning to till like 3 or 4 is good to go. The middle of the day is better than first thing in the morning and last thing.
Yeah, I mean, you have to use common sense. Like you said, I would imagine because people are working all week long that a lot of them say, I'll just go on Saturday.
Yes.
So Saturday is going to be busy. Sunday, like you say, because if there is a polling place that's not in a church, say it's at a fire station or a school, Sunday morning might not be a bad time because so many people are in church that it might give you a window of opportunity. But otherwise, I think it's safe to say try and avoid lunch hours also, because a lot of people might say, I'm just going to take off for lunch and go over and vote. And that might increase the time. Now,
the thing is, don't wait until election day. I mean, there are people who just insist on voting on election day. Um, and you really don't want to do that.
Well, that's like the same people that go shopping on Christmas Eve.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
it's just like tradition that to go out there and do it
Yes.
all on the day before Christmas. You know, that doesn't quite add up in my head, but it but it's I think we've laid some logical ground rules, because the idea is really to try and smooth this out so that everybody has an opportunity and they don't have to wait too long in line. Because remember, if there's a lot of people that are waiting to vote, and you've seen it on the news, if they are applying the social distancing every 6 feet, it isn't going to take very long before you're out the door and in the parking lot 6 feet apart, waiting to get inside the door in order to vote. So be prudent about it. If necessary, drive by a polling place, and if you see that the parking lot is filled and there's people standing in line outside, maybe come back an hour or two later. But I think I would agree with Debbie. I think it's a good advice that mid-morning, during the week, or mid-afternoon are probably the best times. And as Debbie said, probably Wednesdays and Thursdays are the best 2 days of the week. So you might want to just jot that down and have that ready once the polls open. And here in Texas, I think they open on the 13th, isn't it?
They open on the 13th. That
The 13th through the 30th. And again,
first week is 8 to 5,
okay.
Monday through Friday. Saturday will be 7 to 7, and Sunday 1 to 6. The second 2 weeks are 7 to 7 every day, except for Sunday, which is still 12 to 6.
See, and again, that varies from county to county, because I think Denton County is open 7 to 7, right? You know, for all 15 days. And that's why it's important. On the screen right now is the information for the Collin County election office, and I think for Denton County, if you just go to votedenton.com or .gov, you'll be able to get the website to find that. Beyond that, wherever you are, check with your county. Now, it was just on the news here in Texas that if you decide you want to take your ballot and you physically want to put it in the ballot box early, your mail-in ballot, and you want to take it and you want to deposit it in a ballot box, it is more than likely that there is only one place within your county that you can drop off that ballot. I think in Collin County, it's in McKinney, and in Denton, you said earlier, it's in downtown Denton. Well, there's a little bit of an issue going on here down in Houston, because they just said that there is going to be one place in Houston County, which is a huge metropolis, but only one place that you can go and physically drop off your ballot. So I think that's being challenged, and I would venture to guess that there's more like this around the country. Again, you got to be prudent. You got to be knowledgeable of what's going on and what you can do. And if it means you've got to drive an hour and a half just to drop off your ballot, you may be better off taking our advice and going on a Wednesday or a Thursday to your polling place, which is probably not more than a mile or two from your home, and take care of it in person. It's just, I think good food for thought.
There's also been a lot in the news, not so much lately because it's mainly about mail-in ballots now, but about people getting dropped from the voter registration lists. In Texas, you're not dropped unless you've missed, I think it was 4 federal elections. You should still be on the voter registration roll, or unless you've moved and haven't updated your address or your registration, and they tried to send you your new voter registration card, you're still not dropped them, but you'll be in suspense. And all you have to do is fill out your new a change of address form when you come to vote, and that takes care of that. But you could check your voter registration status to make sure that you're registered in Texas at votetexas.gov. You could just go there and it'll show you whether you're registered. The other thing I wanted to say was in Collin County, they update a spreadsheet every day of everybody who's voted. So if you mail in your ballot and you want to wait a week, say, just to make sure that it got there, that's plenty of time for it to have gotten there. You could go onto the website, pull up the spreadsheet, and it'll show you if you're on there or not. Or you can call the election office and they can check the spreadsheet. So you'll know whether your mail-in ballot got there.
Okay. And I didn't know that. So people can check either via computer or by phone,
Yes.
assuming you can get through to the office, to see if your mail-in ballot has gone through. And again, we need to emphasize we're not talking about mailing it in on the 28th of the month or so, before the early voting or so, or within a week of the general election. If you want to find out if you're going to mail it in and you want to find out if it was received, you better get it in the mail pretty soon.
I would suggest if you already have your mail-in ballot and that's how you want to vote, go ahead and do it now. Don't wait. Even though we haven't started in-person voting yet, you can fill out that mail-in ballot and mail it back now.
Now, if people do mail in their ballots today, when do they start getting counted? Not until election day?
Probably on the 13th when voting starts.
So they can start to open this. So it isn't a matter of having to wait until November 4th to open all of those envelopes, to post all those, because obviously it would probably take another week in order to go through and do all of that.
Right.
So there are a lot of questions that come up, and people, as I said earlier, you have to be knowledgeable about what your restrictions are and what your limitations are. And if you got questions, don't let them go unasked. Try and get the answers. And the first place is online. Go to your state sites, go to your county sites to find out. And by the way, those sites will also tell you where your polling place is, because that's usually set up by zip code. It may be that there's a polling place that you know of that's maybe pretty close to your house, but that's for a different zip code. You need to go to the one that is for your zip code, so that you don't get turned away saying, "Oh, I'm sorry, your polling place is on the other side of town."
Now, in Collin County, and counties are different, and I'm not sure about Denton. Dallas County is the same as Collin, and I think Tarrant also. We can vote anywhere at any polling place in the county.
Oh, okay. And where I am, I got a list.
Yeah, I know in Denton, I think at least on election day, you have to go to where your precinct,
Right.
your specific precinct is. But in Collin County and Dallas County and Tarrant County, you can vote anywhere in the county at any polling location. If your precinct says go to one that's by your house, but you're going from work, which is nowhere near, you could go anywhere. You could go to one close to work.
Well, the worst thing, and we can't stress this enough, the worst possible scenario is you pull in, you park your car, you get in line, you wait and wait and wait, you get up to the desk and they say, "I'm sorry, you don't have the proper ID, or you're at the wrong polling place, or there's something wrong," and you have to be turned away. If you know where you're supposed to be and when ahead of time, it's going to make the process so much easier, not only for you, but for everyone else.
Right. Especially if there's a line. You don't want to stand in line and get up there and find out that there's an issue. I mean, the voter has to be a smart voter, have their ID, And the other thing is, you can't have your cell phone on when you're in the room where you're going to vote. A lot of people put their notes in their cell phone about who they want to vote for. They've done their research. You can't have that in when you're voting. So make sure you have a piece of paper and before you get there at home or work, you write down all those lists of people that you want to vote for. This is going to be a long ballot. We can give you a piece of paper and you can go out and, in the hall and write it down when you're there, but it's much better to already have that available.
Absolutely. Because if you do that, then you got to go to the back of the line and wait again to come back in. No, but you're right. And also if you have the notes on your phone, then before you go to the polling place, print it out. Just send it to your printer and print it out so you've got it in paper form. Right. And you know who you're going to vote for. I believe there was one other thing that I saw, and again, I don't know if it's true state by state or now, but there is no more straight party voting.
And you're in Texas for sure. You cannot push Democrat or Republican. You have to vote down the ballot, which is, people should vote down the ballot anyway.
That's right.
That's correct. That also went to court, and the judge said, no, you have to leave. You cannot have it. So, there's no more straight party voting option.
Also online and all, you can find sample ballots that are printed. Either the newspapers are printing them, or you can find sample ballots. And it's a good idea to print out one of those sample ballots and then go online to each of the candidates. If you don't recognize names, instead of it being a dartboard pick, go in and type in the people's names and read a little bit about them, what they stand for, because that will help you make your decisions and then make those notes. An uneducated voter is probably the worst thing that can happen.
Right.
Be knowledgeable of what you're doing, be knowledgeable of the process, and be knowledgeable of the candidates that you're voting for. If you haven't a clue, you're probably, instead of guessing and just saying, "Oh, I like this name better than that one," leave it blank. Go on to the next box and vote for those candidates.
Yeah, I agree.
It's Debbie, you've given us a myriad of information, and again, we are a little bit more focused here because we established at the top of the show that what Debbie is involved in and where she is in Collin County in Texas, it may vary from county to county within your state and from state to state. So use the power of Google to go to your election offices and find out what you need to do. 12 hours a day for 15 days.
Yeah, it's actually a little more because we go in a half an hour early to make sure everything's set up and all our forms are filled out ahead of time. And then at the end, we have to lock everything up, secure everything. And
that's a long time, but I have to say on behalf of all of the voters and everything, thank you very much for what you and all your colleagues do in order to make this democratic process of ours work. And hopefully everything will go through without any hitches this year, because there's a lot of anticipation that it's going to be problematic. But if we are educated and we know what we're doing, we can avoid those problems.
Right. And honestly, I don't think there's going to be any major problems. Honestly, I don't.
Well, it's because people like yourself are knowledgeable of the process and are there to help guide people through the process.
Right.
Well, Debbie Klein, thank you very, very much for joining me on the show and hopefully answering a lot of questions for the audience and all. And I hope you have a very, very good election experience this year. And thanks again for taking the time to be with me.
You're welcome.
You take care. And folks, please be here again next Friday for another edition of Someone You Should Know. And as I always say at the end of my show, go out and be yourself, because everyone else is taken.